Hello, welcome everyone. We'll be getting started here in just a couple minutes as we allow folks to enter the room. Hello, and welcome to everyone joining. We're just giving it a couple minutes to allow folks to enter the webinar. All right, we will go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone. Great to see in the chat everyone welcoming where they're from. You are at the launch of the PRME Global Insights Report, Evidence as a Force for Advancing Responsible Management Education. We are really excited for this webinar and to share this report with you today. A few housekeeping moments for the start. We will be sharing the slides and the recording of this webinar to anyone who has registered afterwards. So you will be receiving all of that. And then on the next slide, we have our agenda. First, we'll have just a bit of an introduction from our new head to talk about the context of this report. And the majority of the time will be spent on the methodology, the findings, and the conclusion. And then we'll take the last 30 minutes for Q&A. So if you look at the bottom of your Zoom panel, you should see a Q&A box. Please feel free to click there and add in your questions. Please feel free to add questions throughout the entirety of the webinar. We can respond in real time, or we can save those questions for the end as well. You can also go in, and if you see someone else's question that you like, you should be able to upvote it as well. So that helps us know which questions people most want answered. So without further ado, I will go ahead and pass to our new head of Prime, Dr. David Steingard.
Hello. This is a very humbling and exciting moment. And I have to start off by saying I would not be in this position and talking with you today if it wasn't for this fantastic team whom has engaged me and allowed me to be involved with Prime. I started being involved with Prime for 10 years. And throughout that 10 years, I've grown close to the mission, the purpose, and being involved with Prime North America. So I'm just ecstatic to be here today and looking forward to this is day 17 on the job. And it's been fantastic. By way of official background, many of you know I have been a professor for 59 semesters, and I am no longer a professor. It changes dramatically in being the head of Prime. I've been involved with HESI, ACSB, RBM, a lot of the sort of business as a force for good ecosystem participation and written, researched, and spoken on a lot of these topics. So enough about me. Let's get into today, which is very exciting. It is the culmination of a huge transformation in evidencing how fantastic all of our schools are all over the world. And today is an opportunity to both celebrate and dig in and analyze how we can take this information and move forward. So the Global Insights Report is a change from what we had in the PDF version, and that is a sea change. And this allows us to see various points of evidence in teaching, in research, in partnerships around advancing the principles of Prime and sustainable development goals. The transition to the Prime Commons was a huge shift from the static reporting to dynamic, ongoing, and benchmarking, and having the peer exchange, of which I have to say it's been an inundation of new information. for me in understanding this. There have been a number of changes for 2025. One of the things the team has been telling me repeatedly is they have their ears open, email open, and really listening to what feedback is out there so we can make the report processing both easier for the inputting and also for extraction. The questionnaire is stable, very strong data from the community, and we were ready to kind of analyze the data and think about best practices. And to do that, we had a very thoughtful process before I was there. I just have been apprised. And I think it was a very good call to take a pro-grade, professional, third-party partnership with Accenture. And Accenture supported the Prime Secretariat in basically doing something that none of us in the community could do, the amount of time for data extraction, model building, and reporting all of the fruits you will see soon. So the objective of the report was threefold. The data-driven foundation to basically see what makes Prime have impact. And impact is the most important thing that we are focusing on. So we need metrics, we need benchmarks and best practices to get us there. The transparency, benchmarking, and continuous improvement, these are all part of the process, which is now much easier that we have an integrated platform than it was through a variety of PDF SIPs, much more kind of static and cumbersome to manage. And again, the translation of the evidence into what does this mean for the community, how we can share best practices and move forward. So with this foundation, we are going to share more information in the coming months. It was really a trove of data. So what you'll see today are really sort of snapshots, cuts, and different kind of takes on the data, but there's a lot more. So one interesting point, the report itself, while it is an analytical product, it really is the signal from the community in letting us know what is possible and what we can achieve together. And I'm very excited as the new head of Prime to learn the best practices on the ground around the world so that we can actually build up from the Secretariat point of view, the support systems of both the knowledge and the translation to help you get to your next level. So a lot of lessons learned, and we'll have various feedback loops involved today and afterwards. But I want to pass it now to members of the fantastic team, which I'm just grateful to inherit. When you start a new job, the first thing you look for is who is on the boat with you. And these are the best people, no doubt. So I'm going to pass it over to Meredith, who is our Senior Manager of Programs and Engagement, and Alex Brewer, the Data Science Manager, and he's been putting a lot of the data together in combination with Accenture, and Cheyenne, who has been kind of orchestrating the whole process and made my job today very easy. Oh, SP Jane, I'm just seeing all of these greetings come up, and it's really nice to see the global community here. And thank you for staying up late or getting up early. And I think I will now pass it on. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, David. And I had a little laugh there when you said that you wouldn't be here without the team, because truly you would be here. You would be on this webinar. You'd just be in a very different seat. So for those that are members of the community, hopefully you recognize that in David, that he does come from this place of understanding and knowing. So thank you, David, for all of that wisdom that you're bringing to us on that side of things. I'll begin by jumping through the methodology. The methodology that will be presented today focuses on method, scope, lens, and gaps. We go through the literature review after that, just at a high level of the lenses that were taken, following on the conceptual model, and then the hypotheses, which Cheyenne will touch on. So from a methodological perspective, I mean, I imagine all of you are researchers to some degree or have research duties at least. So when you look to this study, just with the understanding that this is really a first step, David spoke very, very well to the idea that this was a transition from old school SIP PDFs to the Commons. And in making that transition, our hope was that by having, those beacons as questions, that the answers that came through would be able to contribute to wider themes, so that we would be able to understand what mission, vision, and values of your institution speak more widely to the missions within the Prime community. Just because it's listed as questions, it becomes a very different formatting for your own reporting, and kind of the difference in a social narrative building exercise versus a structured narrative exercise. And so to be able to articulate that difference a little bit has been just the first step of this year that we're excited to share. 1 second, please, just for a moment. Thank you. It is a snow day here, so I am joined by a 2- and 3-year-old that I hope does not derail our show. But to begin just by talking through the mixed methods approach, we looked at 461 SIP submissions this year. That is 100% of those on-time submissions that were made by the September 30th deadline. The deadline was set so that we would have time through the end of the year in order to take stock of these submissions. We would be able to understand what questions were working and weren't working, and you'll all know that we've made large promises to not be making structural and changes throughout this year. So that 461 number is representative of that on-time sample, but that's not to say that there were several SIP submissions that came through between then and the end of the year. So hopefully, as we move forward and the questions have been standardized, we know that number is only going to grow, and with on-time submissions, even more contributions will be made to any future studies that follow a methodology like this. So it's been a very exciting point in time to look back at 2025, take stock, and move forward. As the Prime community and working with Accenture, as David stated, we did want to make sure that the ethic and the essence of what the Prime community is was really felt to an outside consultant partner. So we did schedule with 15 qualitative stakeholder interviews with advisory board members, signatory members, kind of people all encompassing of the community. I've had to read through the names on the list, and some of you on this call were even members of that process. So it's something that we thought was very valuable, so that it's not reading the documents decontextualized and trying to make sense from there. It's really being informed by the advisory board, by the Prime signatories, by all of the different voices that we as the Secretariat hear from on a daily basis. Then moving into a systemic lit review to ground the findings and identify the gaps. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But the emphasis wasn't on, trying to make deep qualitative assumptions about things that are happening. What was made was to focus on transparency, reproducibility, and triangulation. So we wanted to make sure that this became a benchmark, a starting point. Like, this is study 0 for us to all be able to consider what comes next, for you as the community to look into this and say, well, that's a puzzling finding. Let's scratch that itch a little bit more and go from there. So when you read this, please read it with that open mind of, all right, we can see where this is headed. And if you can't, you know exactly who to talk to. Cheyenne and I and Alex and David are all kind of ready and waiting for your questions there. So this is exciting. If I could go to the next slide there. Thank you. Perfect. Scope and considerations. Those SIP submissions that were submitted ahead of September 30th, as I've already mentioned, the self-reported design is something that changed throughout the year. And so reading through the differences in what we experienced in the prior year, where the questions were, very kind of fragmented compared to the narrative building exercise that we were hoping to get to this year. But in addition to that, the way the questions were phrased sometimes, making sure that institutional voice for your business school was able to rise to the top and create the contextual relevance. So for us to be able to find the narrative a little bit easier, so it's not just singular narratives, but it tells that globally comprehensive story that can then be broken down by themes and areas. Variations across those languages, regions, institutional specific capacities, and broader participation for shared learning. We're in Prime so that we can learn and share together. It is that community building and telling our stories through narrative. And focus on the signatories reinforces good governing and learning platforms. It's the commons. It's making sure that the narratives come to the commons and that they don't sit idle, that it becomes that moment for exchange, that moment for shared learning, and really connecting and collaborating where you're not just digesting or you're not just talking, but it is a space for shared learning there. All right, on to the design. Mature pathways for enabling conditions for deeper RME integrations. This is where we would like to see the Commons get to as that place. It has those capacities right now where we are set up for the future. Alex has spent a long time building this, and so to be able to see these first narratives rise through the reports is an important first step. We want to make sure that that quality and quantity has a good balance, differentiates representation engagement from substantive institutional change, making sure that there are those moments of being able to separate, being able to combine, and being able to move forward. Benchmarking with Prime, you'll see a reference to equity here in the SDGs. We come back to these throughout the specific hypotheses, so I'll leave it vague for the moment just by the nature of how much there is to unpack there, but knowing that the hopes of understanding the language and the use case around specific themes per region and over time is something that we hope to examine a bit further. Policy-related insights, working with the Global Compact, having Accenture as a partner on this particular resource does give us that moment to think through policy-relevant insights that we can demonstrate business school leadership and not relying on the Global Compact narrative of business as the force, as the leaders, but knowing what we know and having that data to step forward there. And of course, it positions SIP as an infrastructure for collective learning, and I don't think I can say that enough. All right, so next on, theoretical lenses. You'll be able to read through this in a lot greater detail, but the literature was conducted from a place of being able to situate the conversation within the wider literature review there. So many of the articles will be familiar to you, especially as Jonas and Mette and even Omid a little bit, I believe, too, have published on this throughout the years. So there was a lot of great ability from special issues, from books, from the working groups, from other sources within the community to already be able to reach out and pull in conversations happening about Prime where we can build up these lenses. So heavily leaning on institutional legitimacy and stakeholder theory, and then referencing the world that we live in around the SDGs and equity, and really trying to capture those things as mature benchmarks over time. All right. The gaps. This is an interesting space to be touching in the literature review because we can draw conclusions ourselves, and we do as researchers draw conclusions from the literature. But hopefully, I'm not going to read through this list, but hopefully you'll be able to see some of these themes and go, oh, I could dig into that. I could see that for myself and really be excited to explore as a researcher, as a contributor, as someone who's making sense of this for your own business school community. You might remember, for those of you that have been with Prime for a couple of years, the higher education the student voices work that was done by the Higher Education for Good Foundation. And we had a data set with them, and folks were able to kind of play with it and think through it in creative and meaningful ways. So to highlight some research gaps here in case your brain wants to noodle around what is possible from this reporting. All righty. Cheyenne, I will pass to you. Thank you, folks.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So this is our concept model. We did a comparative analysis, and then we had measurable outputs, and then we had outcomes. So in the comparative analysis, really wanted to explore both similarities and variances in responses across various parameters. And we'll get into this a little bit, looking at what it looks like across various regions. And we define those regions based on the UN Global Compact and how the UN defines regions. We also look at capacity. We look at accreditation status. We look at prime tenure. So there's a lot of different variables that we looked at, and we'll give a little bit more of that there. We also then kind of considered some measurable outputs. So the SIP in and of itself is a lot. It's some questions, it's some short answers, it's some numbers, it's some long narratives. So we tried to translate the SIP content into quantifiable indicators across 3 areas. 1, curriculum integration, 2, institutional engagement, and 3, governance and transparency. And then lastly, on the outcome, after doing these comparative analysis, measuring it, we tried to interpret the findings at an institutional and system level results. So not looking at an individual at a school, but trying to really measure it across institutions and at that level as well. So just a little bit of kind of our model there. And I will pass, oh, I guess I have the next slide as well. So, our hypotheses, and let me share that we started with 41 hypotheses, and it was quite difficult to narrow it down. So, we kind of got to these four hypotheses that we thought were a good start to kind of group as best as we could some of the things that we were looking to analyze. So, one, how do institutional regional characteristics, including accreditation status, geographical location, shape the completeness and quality of a SIP report? And we'll define completeness and quality in a couple slides. So, kind of again, that those variances and comparing that. Two, how does institutional engagement in PRIME influence the diversity and depth of evidence represented in SIP reports? So really kind of understanding, are the programs that we are offering, are the communities that we create, are they useful in evidencing, and what can we learn from that? Three, to what extent does the integration of the SDGs and equity and inclusion frameworks within SIPs associate with external recognition and regional variation? There's a lot of things that we could dive into as far as the content, but we chose for this first edition to really just focus on a broad look at the SDGs and then also equity and inclusion. And then lastly, how do institutional resources, prime membership, tenure, and collaborative practices influence the institutionalization of RME and its societal impact? So again, how do these resources, both in your institutions as well as your engagement with Prime, kind of support RME? So again, broad strokes of what we were trying to look at, and we go into more detail into each and every one of these. So now I will go ahead and pass to Alex.
Hello. I'm going to go over some of the more formal terms that we're using in this analysis. One of them is completeness rate. This goes over how many of your overall questions did you answer when you submitted SIP. We do have some mandatory questions, so you can't submit it and have a completeness rate of 0. We use this to see did you go above and beyond and how full is your report as you've submitted it. Submission rate is the proportion of signatory institutions that have submitted per region or per those that were assigned and had to submit and have. On SIP reporting quality, this is something that I'm sure some of you have thought about in the past. Just to clarify, it's not a rating, it's not a ranking. This is an analytical measure. We use it to assess patterns and variations in these other statistics and other measures, and also to see where does the completeness, clarity, and structure of SIP reporting come from so that we can draw these conclusions out. It's not going to be used to evaluate or compare you. We do hope to give this back at one point, but please know it's not ranking, it's not rating, it's just a measure. Moving ahead to look at the difference in completeness rates. Most signatories report comprehensively. 2/3 achieve 60% or higher. We see that a large share of signatories reach 50 to 100% completeness, indicating that many of you go well beyond minimum mandatory reporting. The highest number of submissions appear at 80, 90, and 100% completeness, suggesting that once you commit to SIP, you do really fill out the whole thing and you take it as not just a compliance measure, but a thing to capture your institutional history and share it with others. Sharing some other statistics that are found in the report is that Oceania had the highest engagement and the LAC region the lowest, with Europe, North America, Asia, and Sub-Saharan Africa falling between these extremes. To be a bit more granular regarding report quality, both the UK and Germany exhibited significantly higher participation than the US. However, this is moderate, but it's not uniform across its distribution. Moving ahead once again, looking at the regional differences on SIP quality based on accreditation, we do see that accredited institutions report significantly higher SIP quality than non-accredited institutions, and regions with higher submission rates also tend to demonstrate higher SIP quality. We did check this. The Kruskal-Wallis test shows a statistically significant difference in SIP quality across regions with very high significance values. This confirms that there are regional patterns and not just random variation. We do see that Oceania and Europe lead on SIP quality. They have the highest medium SIP quality scores. This shows more developed narratives, stronger evidence integration, and closer alignment with the guidance that was provided. We do see some strong internal variation in North America, Middle East, North Africa, and Africa regions, very wide interquartile ranges, and that means that the SIP quality varies considerably across these signatory institutions. We think that this reflects institutional capacity and reporting cultures and prime coordination within your region rather than a normative commitment. I'll stay here for just a second so you can take a look at this graphic. Can we move ahead? The next thing that we'll look at is one of the questions that we asked was, what percentage of the faculty at your institution actively contribute to your work with Prime, advancing RME, or addressing sustainable development challenges through the work? We use this to look at institutional engagement with Prime, and we try and regress this upon SIP reporting quality. We do find that there's a positive and statistically significant relationship between institutional engagement and SIP reporting quality. Here in this figure, you can see some descriptive statistics that show a progressive increase in average SIP quality across these engagement bands. The variation here is quite strong for each category, and even with a high institutional engagement, we can see some scores that fall within lower reported institutional engagement. However, even though it's modest in magnitude, the relationship is consistent, it's meaningful across these institutions, and it indicates that higher faculty engagement is associated with higher quality SIP. Let's go another slide forward and talk a little bit about how we found this SIP quality measure. We went through and, with our partners in this report, worked to make rubrics so we could see and measure and create this measurement of quality within SIP. We use this for an overall quality measure, looking at SDG alignment, language around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Typically, we would rate based on a 4-level scale of how we're seeing these activities evidenced within your SIP, whether it's absent, implied, explicit, or clearly institutionalized are the 4 different levels that we assessed for. And we looked at these references across gender representation, LGBTQ plus inclusion, accessibility and well-being, cultural indigenous inclusion, social and economic equity, governance policy and accountability, and human rights, ethics, and anti-discrimination. You'll have access to these rubrics with the report, so you can go and see exactly how we measured and what criteria we used to draw out these scores. Let's go forward again. Here's a figure looking at the measurements of equity integration by region. Overall, equity and inclusivity integration differ significantly across regions. Oceania demonstrates the highest and most consistent levels of equity institutionalization with high median scores and low variability. Europe, Middle East, North Africa, and Eastern Europe form a relatively coherent cluster with moderately high integration. Sub-Saharan Africa, Asia, and North America exhibit quite a strong difference between the reported activities here. We believe this is due to uneven institutional adoption. And we do see that Latin America and the Caribbean show the lowest central tendency with equity and inclusivity references. I'll stay here for a moment so you can look at this figure. We can go ahead once more. Looking a bit more about these regional variations in explicit terminology and evidence in SIP. Across all regions, social and economic equity, human rights and ethics, and governance policy and accountability score the highest in terms of their presence within SIP reports. We believe this is because your institutions are more consistently addressing equity through these formal frameworks, policies, and institutional commitments. There are some that are lower and more variable. Those seem to be gender representation and LGBTQ plus inclusion, cultural and indigenous inclusion, and accessibility and well-being. They show quite a strong regional disparity. We believe this indicates that they're less systematically embedded across your curriculum and institutional practice in some regions. And we do have different regional leaders for the scores in SIP reports, depending on the measure dimension. Oceania and Europe show really high scores for governance, rights, and economic equity. We believe this reflects mature policy integration. Middle East and North Africa demonstrate strong emphasis on social and economic equity and human rights and ethics, often exceeding scores seen in some higher income regions. North America shows strong performance in economic equity, but comparatively lower scores on cultural inclusion and governance. We think this is due to a narrow focus in those regions and possibly some of the changes in political climate recently. I'll be passing back off here in just a moment to Meredith, but I'll keep this figure up for just a moment so you can see. This is also in the report, so you'll have all the time that you'd like to go over it. Whenever you think we're ready.
All right, very good. Thank you, Alex. Hypothesis 3, near and dear to our heart as it's about the SDGs. And you'll remember from the previous submission models before Commons came along that there would be that interest question at the end of which SDGs did you touch upon in your report. So reporting on the SDGs isn't anything that is new to the Prime community, but the method in which we communicate it, of course, has changed significantly. The findings are about what you would expect just from how the reporting goes. So we've got quality education, SDG 4, decent work and economic growth, SDG 8, industry, innovation and infrastructure, SDG 9, consumption and production, SDG 12, climate, SDG 13 as very pronounced within how they're seen within the reports. So considered deeply embedded there. Then that was kind of our top tier of SDGs that we really saw quite frequently. And it's a business school doing education. So happy to see that these are the core things that we're focusing, and also really positive to see that climate is up there kind of with those heavy hitters of business and education. Then beneath that, there was more of a second cluster around inequalities, sustainable cities and community, peace, justice, and strong institutions and partnerships that shows, all right, these are of strong importance, but not the most important. And that feels quite warm to what we hear from the community on a regular basis through chapter and champion conversations, but also through the literature. So it is a bit of a reinforcement there. But it's also just good to know where our heads are at. And I'll come back for a later hypothesis as well. This isn't the last you'll hear from me, but within that discussion, I'll be touching upon the length of engagement that an institution has had with Prime. So to bring one of those themes forward right now, since building narratives in Commons for the first or second time this year, it does make strong sense that focusing on good business and quality education would be two areas that it's very clear and very easy to create narratives on. If in the future there is any kind of, or as you fill out the feedback form after this, if there is any consideration for making narratives around the kind of less explicit SDGs to our work, if there's any way to bring those narratives forward that you'd feel you'd like support on, or if there's like a webinar or anything that I or we could offer, we're happy to have the conversations to really surface those. These are just the tops. And so we've highlighted them as such, but not to lose any narratives along the way, because that is quite an important part of the SDGs and wanting to make sure that not only is this framework giving us language and giving us, discourse for the future, but it's also helping us to build the narrative forward. So the least touched upon, life below water, life on land, those ecological and biodiversity focused goals. And I mean, that is something that we tend to see. So I'll go to the next slide just to give that overview of what each SDG looks like based on popularity. Yes. And I can pause here for just a second if anyone wants to take it in. It is tiny, just based on the fact that there are 17 SDGs and we have a lot to showcase here. But please dig in, because each of those 17 already represents just another bit of work that we can research and explore together there. So that is hypothesis number 3 for the moment. Thank you.
Looking at some of the findings from Hypothesis 4, we looked at institutional resources, evidence diversity, prime collaboration, and institutionalization of RME practices. Here we have 3 different pieces of results. One of them is that SIP reporting quality is strongly associated with RME institutionalization. Institutions producing richer, more evidence-based SIPs consistently demonstrate better embedding of the principles of Prime across governance, curriculum, operations, and organizational culture. What you see in that figure is a regression of SIP quality and a measure of and RME institutionalization. The next figure is a is of descriptive statistics for the relationship between prime collaboration measures and SIP quality measures. We do see that this is positively associated with RME institutionalization. Institutions with more substantive and validated prime partnerships tend to demonstrate stronger RME embedding. The third figure here is descriptive statistics for the relationship between institutional resource measures and SIP quality measures. We show a modest but statistically significant association with RME institutionalization. Higher resource capacity supports deeper RME embedding. We then use these in a multivariate model, which further analyzes the combination of these variables. We see that it explains about 42% of the variance in RME institutionalization as a measure, with no evidence of multicollinearity or heteroscedasticity. This regression confirms that SIP reporting quality is the strongest and most consistent predictor of RME institutionalization. If you have a strongly measured report in all the other measures, you probably also have very strong RME institutionalization. Institutional resources do remain very statistically significant in the combined model, indicating an independent but secondary contribution. Prime collaboration becomes statistically non-significant once SIP quality is included, suggesting overlapping explanatory power. And we do see that the combined model confirms the SIP reporting quality functions as the central integrated measurement or mechanism linking institutional resources, collaborative activity, and the systemic institutionalization of RME. Passing back off to Meredith.
Thanks, Alex. And this is what I was just referencing in that previous discussion. So the hypothesis around tenure of the institution, the signatory within Prime, and the reporting quality. So one thing that we did want to explore was, do you need to have been around since the founding to be writing a good report? But we've all had such different and various experiences throughout the last 3 years, especially through the Commons process. And what that has done is really level the playing field. We are all new to reporting in Commons. So there is really kind of that neutralized line there around it's okay to have been short, medium, or long-term members and still show high engagement through SIP reporting and through that quality there. One thing that I would like to kind of put in your ear to take to the future is just what that means for new members or for schools that are in your chapter but aren't necessarily Prime signatories, that it does become like quite a carrot to say, just because you haven't been around with Prime writing SIP reports, receiving beautiful SIP quality awards for the last 10 years doesn't mean you don't have something powerful to deliver within this narrative, to be able to share that and to be able to welcome others in along with us on this process. And so you can interpret this in a lot of ways with the newness of the Commons experience, but I hope that it does give us a bit of a platform to discuss with others to say, it's not an exclusive club. This isn't, something where you're on kind of a limited term for the first few years before you're able to give anything powerful to the narrative. It is full immersion from day one that you're able to make positive contributions through narrative and through some of the things that you're already doing through business as usual at your school. And those can be just as powerful as folks who have been around since the start. So it's an exciting finding. It's an interesting finding, but it's one that we've kind of really kind of grown to enjoy, just what it means for the potential for growing the community and being able to learn from new narratives for the future. Cheyenne, I believe I might pass to you now.
Yeah, and we're moving on with good time. So on the next few slides, we'll go over just kind of our big key takeaway conclusions. So starting with this first one, the quality of a business school with signatories SIP report reflected in both the depth and the evidence that we see in the report is a strong indicator of institutionalization of RME. So again, just as a reminder, SIP reporting quality, it refers to an analytical measure, not a ranking, not a rating. And so in this case, what does this mean for the Prime community? It means that strengthening your SIP, the process of SIP reporting is really key and a really good kind of chance to reflect on what you've done, to just take a moment to sit and review, not necessarily audit yourself, but go through and these questions are meant to prompt you of what have we done? Where are some gaps that maybe we can identify, that we can work on? And also gives you a chance to really make it coherent, create a narrative, a story, provide some clarity into what you're doing while also providing some evidence. So the SIP is not, I think, as Alex mentioned, and it seems like our community does not take it this way. It's not necessarily a compliance mechanism, but also a really good chance of that process of measuring your institutionalization of RME. On the next slide. Our next conclusion is that equity and inclusion are widely present in business school SIPs, but they are expressed through locally specific vocabularies, cultural points, reference points, and governance models. I think this is to be expected. We are a global community. How everyone refers to equity and inclusion looks really different across the globe. It's going to be very different region to region. And so, what does this mean for the Prime community? I think in most cases, we would often say there is something to learn from every different region. And I think that is still true in this case. But I think it also says that those who are looking to strengthen their equity and inclusion are best served by engaging with local and regional peers. And this is why we have our chapters. Chapters have their annual meetings, they have their working groups. There's a lot to learn from those regional networks that we have set up. And that might be the best way to strengthen your equity and inclusion reporting. On the next slide. And again, Meredith touched on this, but ecological and biodiversity focused SDGs are least evident in business schools. Again, I think this is expected given that it is a business school. There might not be a course that is as focused on biodiversity as we would expect. And again, what does this mean? This is a really clear opportunity. This is a gap that we've identified and a great chance to connect biodiversity and nature into core business disciplines, looking at how it plays into value chains, looking at how it plays into innovation and strategy, and could really help accelerate and make those SDGs that are more focused on ecological issues more teachable, more researchable, and more actionable. Next. So access to institutionalized resources plays a critical role in how RME is internalized. Again, I think this is nothing new. I think it's apparent that schools that have more resources, more capacity, are able to implement this RME a little bit more. Those that have dedicated staffing, that have budget lines, that have support from leadership, and the time are more likely to integrate and present it as a cohesive report. So again, what does this mean? I think this is more of just, we have the data now to back this case that if we want RME to be durable, they need to treat it as a resource priority, not an add-on. And I think this is usually pretty apparent in our schools, but this report just kind of really hammers that home and makes it a chance to kind of, if you are someone who's looking to build capacity in your institution, you can take a look at this data and say, this makes it clear that this is necessary. These resources are necessary to help us do that. And that's what we were hoping this could give to our community and to other business schools who are looking to kind of ramp up their RME integration. And then lastly, business and management schools that participate in Prime tend to integrate responsible management more deeply into their teaching, research, operations, as reflected in the SIP reports. So all of this to say is that community participation, it isn't just engagement. There really is a lot to learn, both from some of the programs that we have to offer, but then also in the community that we have here at Prime. Engaging, we looked at engagement not as, someone who did the climate literacy training or someone who did the pedagogy training, but those who are really active and involved in their communities. So, attending the chapter meetings, responding to and being part of those communities, it really is a strong indicator that can strengthen both practice and reporting. So again, I would keep pressing that button of just engage with your community at both the local and global level. And so looking ahead.
Cheyenne, I know that we're handling this slide together, but you just said something quite wonderful there that hasn't been said enough. If I could hop in, would you mind?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Sure. So yes, I think that the role of the chapter is something that we in this presentation have really underemphasized, but in saying that just there, Cheyenne, I think you really drove it home quite well. Like there are so many members of chapter leadership that have joined this call and have been leaders in making sure that their communities feel the support and have the understanding there. And so just a moment of thanks to those folks, and then just a nudge in that direction too. If you are trying to make sense of this exercise for your school or your culture, this is the community that can really help kind of keep you safe and move you forward there. And in so many cases, we've even seen folks engaging beyond their single chapter and reaching out to folks across various chapters and showing leadership in that way. So while we have pitched this coming from a very centralized place, the leadership that it took at a local level and at regional level to get us here is absolutely mammoth. So thank you for that. And then a second point, just because I haven't been very good at the chat, but I saw that Nada said it would be wonderful to share the best practices, and Sophie had already responded to that. But just two little plugs on that one too of as Alex noted, quality and completeness being a reflection on quantity in this iteration a lot. So answering every question, despite how laborious it is really kind of that first step towards quality reporting. And something that struck me as listening to us craft the narrative in this way for the very first time, what was shared by the signatories is very reflective of what was asked and how it was asked on our end. And so to see what appear to be outliers when it comes to folks who were reporting on issues of biodiversity is probably down to a fact that we didn't necessarily overemphasize inviting those people along. As this was the first time doing it, I imagine you all wanted to play it a little safe and make sure that you had your best prime foot forward with your best RME management, marketing, HR, like your core team, whoever that might be. And so the idea of what works best for the future is really inviting others along the way. And like I talked in the tenure slide for other institutions, not just tenure beyond your institution, but tenure within your institution. And you don't need to be the prime point of contact in order to have something wonderful to say about societal impact or equity in the economy. Like there are so many themes for so many folks, and your business school is full of experts. So perhaps just to say, don't let the findings scare you. Don't let the limitations that we've shown be limitations. In fact, think of them as opening factors and invite those other educators and researchers along whose voice might have gotten lost just by virtue that this was the first time doing it. And maybe apologies for myself for asking so many probing questions within the SIP report and just for bearing along with us through that process, because it does show quite good data. So thank you for the contributions that have been made.
Yeah, thanks for that extra context. And yeah, maybe just echoing to thank everyone who has done the SIP reports in these last 2 years as we've done a transition. We know it hasn't been easy, and we really appreciate all of you for sticking through to us. And one of the big questions we've been getting is, why have we done this transition? And a lot of it is for this right here, is to be able to analyze a little bit deeper and dig into it, and to be able to paint a broader picture of what it looks like, what does responsible management education look like across the globe at the regional level. And it's easier to do that when we have a bit of standardization. So hopefully this answers a little bit more of that question of why. So looking ahead, obviously we have a lot of data that we've gotten from you all to create this report. It is data by the community, and we'd like to give it back to the community. So we do hope to make that available. There's a lot for us to kind of clean up and go through. It won't be fully comprehensive, as we need to exclude any identifiable information, given kind of the sharing rights around all the questions and things like that. But we will be releasing regional data sets at some point in the next few months. So hopefully you guys can take this data and dive even deeper into it. I think something that also was mentioned at the very beginning is that we did work with Accenture on this first edition to kind of, we had a really short window to when the SIP deadline closed to when we wanted to launch this on the International Day of Education, which is why we went with Accenture. But moving forward as well, I think we would like to take this foundation and let the community now be the ones that do this analysis, that decide the hypotheses, and that create this report in the future. So more information on how we're going to engage the community on that will be forthcoming. We've really just been in a sprint to get this first one out, and now that we've got this, we will be collecting feedback, and we'll be kind of figuring out the next way to kind of do this report again, as we would like this to be an annual report. So in order for us to do this next version, please complete your SIP reports. The 2026 SIP reporting window will open on March 1st. For those of you who have not done a SIP report with us, because maybe Commons has been intimidating or you're a new joiner, we will be having webinars that will walk through the SIP questionnaire. We also recognize that translation is a language barriers can be a big part of why we see less engagement in certain regions like Latin America and the Caribbean. So we will be translating those SIP previews, and also hoping to look into a little bit more medium term how we can provide translation to the Prime Commons platform. We really want to make sure that SIP reporting is accessible to everyone. So that is a big priority for us this year. We've also added some tips and nudges to help you answer the questions for those who may be unsure of how to find the data or how to find those answers. We're adding a little bit more of some guidance. I think someone also asked for best practices. For 2025, we had an example SIP report that you could refer to, but this was, a fictional school that we kind of went through and did the SIP report ourselves since nobody had done the questionnaire. Now that the questions themselves will not be changing, we're going to try to identify some SIPs, and we'll reach out to you if we have identified your SIP as one we'd like to use as a clear example so that, again, the community is learning from the community. And so those will be pinned and available in Prime Commons as you open in March. And the submission date is not June. The deadline will be the end of September again. So you'll have from the start of March until the end of September. So a big timeline there. And I think that will be our timeline every year, which is, I think, we've agreed on. And then also for those who are new, we'll have guided tutorials for Prime Commons, the same ones that we've had every year, and we'll be continuing to update those as we release various features. For those of you who have done the SIP reporting already in Prime Commons, again, a really big thank you to those, and especially the 461 who got it in on the deadline. Very impressive. We have heard your feedback and are making a few changes. We're going to make sure there's an easy reuse of evidence and questions. So when you go to answer a question in 2026, you'll see something that says answer available from 2025, and you can select it and you can reuse it or you can edit it right there. For example, your mission statement, we don't expect that to change every year. So all you have to do is just click, reuse this answer and it's automatically updated. Or maybe you have your strategy and there's been a slight change. You just need to maybe upload a new document. You can easily re-add that evidence. So that should make it easy. It's for year to year. If it's your first year, there is a little bit more of a lift on that very first year as you kind of answer some of those questions. But then year to year, it should be much easier. We're also hoping to add an option of bulk upload of evidence. I don't believe we'll have this available right on March 1st, but it will be available later on in the reporting process. This is in response to some of the course questions and the research questions. We've also added a little bit more of a description of kind of a recommended cap on what we're looking for in those courses and just a bit more detail of what we're looking for so that you don't feel like you have to upload your entire course catalog. But those of you who do have a lot of courses as they relate to responsible management education, we're hoping to give you the option for bulk upload because that was highly requested. So just a little bit of how we're trying to respond to the feedback that we're getting from you, but also trying to kind of make it accessible for those who are maybe just getting started. And again, along with recognizing best practices, we are bringing back our recognition of excellence in reporting awards. We kind of paused those as we were in this transition, but given that this questionnaire will kind of remain the same, hopefully year to year, we're hoping to announce the 2025. So the 2025 SIP report that happened last year. We'll be recognizing those at the Prime Global Forum in Cairo, Egypt in June. So if you have not registered for the Global Forum, that is open right now, and early bird registration prices do end at the end of February. And so lastly, we really want to do a deeper analysis in the next edition. I think I saw a question in here from Batul about are there plans to connect SIP-based insights more directly with measurable contributions to the SDGs? We would like to. We'd like to explore a lot more detail into the content of the reports. And again, we're expecting to have more and more SIP reports every year. We're hoping this helps give a little bit of insight as to why we're looking for this. If you want this to be more substantial, please complete your SIPs. And also this data comes back to you. So it's a little bit of a two-way street. So we want to see, what do you want the report to explore? We have a form. I think if Sophie doesn't mind copying that link into the chat. We want to hear from you. What do you want to explore? What hypotheses do you want? What feedback do you have for us? All of that is going to be something that we're looking to and will inform our next edition, which again, we're hoping will be led by the community as well. So that's everything looking ahead, and we are, I think, 6 minutes ahead of schedule. So we will now move into a Q&A, and please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A box. And I wanted to go ahead and respond to one and maybe ask Alex. Jill's asking if the findings across regions are also in some way related to the number of schools in each region. I do think we tried to balance that out, right? So that there's a phrase here that I'm not recalling
Yeah,
exactly.
normalization. So
Thank
we
you.
do correct our statistics based on the number of people that have provided us those statistics through their submissions. For regions with a very, very small number of schools compared to Europe, our most populous one, there is some effect, but we do correct for it. We do normalize all data throughout the analysis so that this is not as strong of an effect. Um, yeah, so we do correct for it. There could be something still in the least populous region, but the other regions should be quite stable as measurements.
I saw someone said the feedback form link isn't working. I just updated it, so that should be available now.
Shane, I think that's the link to the report that you just shared, not the
Oh
feedback
my
form.
gosh, I've got too many things I'm copying and pasting. All right, that should work. Which activity period does the SIP 2026 cover? Can it cover calendar year 2025? Yes, I think we encourage it to be the calendar year of 2025, but obviously we know that people's calendar years are a little bit different, so do what makes the most sense for you. But we're looking mostly for the calendar year. Any other questions? Yeah, it looks like Orla had asked if the methodology analyzed the upload of policy documents as well as the specific answer text. I know, Alex, you answered this. Maybe if you don't mind answering out loud. There's also a
Sure.
follow-up on providing further details on the textual analysis methodology.
Yep. Um, Within SIP, you answer questions and attach evidence to these answers. And when we go through and do our analyses here to look at SIP quality measures or integration of RME, institutionalization, SDG reference, we do look at this evidence. This year, we only looked at text content. So if it's a PDF, we looked at all the text. If it's a Word doc, we did not look at attachments that were purely images or images found within PDFs. This is something that we want to expand to next year. So if you reported an evidence and it had relevant texts in it, it was included. But if it had relevant images, we could not look at those this year, but we plan to do it next year. The methodology here is fully described in the report. We do have the rubrics used, and we will be open sourcing the code that was used to create the report, including the statistics and the grading or measurement of SIP.
And just to reiterate, the recording and these slides will be shared with everyone. Ruben, your question on do we have an overarching message? It's a good question. We have about five of them. Again, it was really hard to narrow it down. I think the main message that we want to maybe this is coming from myself, so others please feel free to chime in. My main message I would say to our signatory members is that the SIP report is really a strong tool to help you measure and to reflect and identify how your institution is operationalizing RME. It's not exclusively a compliance measure. It really is a tool that we want you to use and to learn from other members. And I hope that this helps you to kind of understand that a little bit further. But I don't know if Meredith or Alex or David, any other things they want to add as like an overarching message.
I'm in agreement on that, but also just to say that the old SIPs, that format, there were so many messages within each that we couldn't create a uniformed guidance for, that having this report allow us to have a look into what the micro messages are gives us a good platform for creating that overarching message for the future. So taking it as more of a reflective place than a place to kind of make that statement at this point.
If we don't have any other questions, and again, I know there's a lot to digest and the report is quite detailed, please read and again use that form to give us feedback. You're also welcome to write to us with any questions you may have. And I'll put our email address in here for those who have questions. But given that we do have our new head of Prime with us, Dr. David Steingard. Also happy to utilize this time if anyone has questions for him, for his vision, or anything in that regard. And if nobody else has questions, we're also happy to give you 30 minutes back of your time. But just wanted to open up the floor for that opportunity as well.
All right, David, Jill asked for your initial reflections on your time with Prime. How many days has it been?
I think today is day 17. My reflections are, well, I'll give you a microcosm of what one of the days was like. We're familiar with poets and quants, and Cheyenne arranged for me to have an interview as the new head of Prime with Poets and Quants. And Poets and Quants, for those of you who are not familiar, it's probably one of the livelier and I wouldn't call it sensationalistic, but it is a more personal and sort of introspective and yet very public facing academic a place where you see interesting interpretations about ratings and rankings, new trends in higher ed. And I was asked several times, for your vision for Prime and the Compact and the United Nations. We live in times now where some of the norms are shifting, to put it politely. And my response was, as I will tell the community, there has never been a better time for, and I think the detail of the reporting and the platform that we have and the research that can come out of it to sort of concretize our impact. We need this more than ever. So I'm very optimistic that the message of what Prime is doing based on SDGs, the Prime principles, the 10 principles of UN Global Compact, the UN Charter, the UN Declaration for Human Rights, all of these kind of foundational approaches and value systems that feed responsible management education. This is the time. And as a word on the strategy and situation of the Prime team, we have gone through, just to be very candid about it, we've gone through the early year budgeting and strategic planning. And I think we are very focused for some concentrated efforts in supporting the chapters and the schools and the faculty members and the students to elevate it. So one of the, for example, it was mentioned that we are not going with Accenture for the second round of data analytics. We are going to put more of this information out there, and hopefully the community, particularly hopefully at a regional level, will take these insights, and there were several questions about what are best practices, and generate those best practices and celebrate them. And I think this is part of a move to sort of decentralize and empower and support and serve the chapters for the greater cause. Because one of the clarification points I think that's come up in the strategy for this year is, what is the role of the Secretariat? Well, clearly the Secretariat has many of its sort of programs that initiate at the Secretariat, that invite and of course involve the community, and that we will continue to do, and maybe being slightly more focused and judicious about the uptake and impact of those for the community, but equally supporting these initiatives. And I've just been delighted about, for example, working groups, the number of working group applications, Meredith is smiling, that have come in, and the variety, arguments over, should we have a working group on decolonization mixed with indigenous communities, or are those two separate? This is great. We've had several applications for responsible management education in the arts. So I'm seeing a flourishing of interest and participation from the community. And I think our job as a Secretariat team is to empower that with the resources and the access we have. So as part of that, you see behind me the One Global Compact. It is part of the UN Global Compact strategy, which for those who need a brief refresher, the UN Global Compact is effectively the corporate arm of the United Nations. It was chartered by the Secretary General back then 25 years ago, Kofi Annan, who said, we need a agency, an initiative, we need an arm effectively of the UN that, and the quote is on the wall in New York, it says, to make business more humane. So Prime spun off as an initiative, as you can see, to help the business education, management education, research end of that. So we are very fortunate that there's been changes, I think, in how Prime is situated within the compact and the United Nations more broadly, in terms of our partnerships with UNESCO and United Nations University and the actual SDGs division at the UN, DSDG, where we're going to be bringing a lot more of those resources and access to fortify the mission of what we're doing. So I think structure follows strategy. I think the strategy is really to marshal what is going on in the compact and the country networks. And many of you in chapters are involved with companies who are UNGC participants engaged in sustainability and leadership and ethics and responsible management. And we want to tap that because building the bridge between business practice and responsible management education genius of the Prime community is a paramount goal. So I want to pitch that's coming up is we have two upcoming first ever Prime sponsored academic peer-reviewed journals from Emerald Publishing, our partner. And one of those is on AI and responsible management. And the other, do we have the name on that yet? It is so new. We don't have the final cooked name. Meredith can put it in the chat.
I didn't want to say it in case it gets edited because they're still making their cover art. It's so new. We have that flexibility.
So new. The
But
ink.
Noah's on the call, so she may have.
Yes, and Noah, thank you. Is one of our editors, right? It's a very good and small world here. So, for example, there's going to be ability to make call for papers for special issues. And maybe one of the special issues can be a follow-up to today's conversation, taking the research and analysis and maybe having it from each chapter about what they mined from the report So we can do any number of things, but I do know one of the other strategic sort of sub themes is, especially today when higher education budgets and value systems are shifting, participation is a real concern from our community because, I've been there. 17 days ago, I was there as a professor on a tenure track, being tenured, trying to move ahead, keep through the system. You need research, and you need research, and you need research. So that will be something I'm bringing. Had some, and we'll post these eventually. Had a number of really good opportunities to publish with a variety of different people presenting at the Academy of Management. So I want to keep encouraging us to build it up. And I can say there's so much that we're already doing that is not celebrated. I like to celebrate. In the Financial Times list of the 100 most research impact institutions. So just looking at research across SDGs, across policy, across links to the case center, very specific metrics. Out of the 100 schools on that list, Prime has 42. 42% of the 100 top school research outputs are coming from us. And that is a message that I'm going to work to amplify and be very opportunistic about it. That research we're doing, that thought leadership on topics that are more exigent than ever. We should work on getting that knowledge out there, and some of that will come from an initiative for the next 4 years in the UN Global Compact called the Business Case for Sustainability, where Prime is woven into the strategic plan of UN Global Compact to help support that. I'm talking a lot. Are there questions? I'm trying to get some questions going here. Okay.
Yeah,
Sharon, if you wouldn't mind reading the questions, that would be great. Thank you.
sure. So there's a couple questions asking for kind of your long-term vision for Prime, and I think you've been touching on it a little bit, but maybe before that, someone just kind of in relation to your mention of the SDGs, someone, Mawesh asked if we think of post-Agenda 2030, how would the alignment with the SDGs be impacted? And again, I'm happy to have others chime in on this. I just want to give a couple thoughts. The principles of Prime, our 7 principles, were established before Agenda 2030 and will be there afterwards. So we like to think of them as vehicles for implementing the UN sustainability agenda, whether that be the Millennial Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals, or any goals or not that come afterwards. So that's why we like to really focus on our principles, and especially in the SIP reporting. I do imagine the SIP questionnaire will change if, the SDGs after 2030. But that's kind of how we like to think about it. And so that's why we have those principles that are grounded in the core values of education in business education. And then we can tie that into sustainability. Yeah, Meredith, go ahead.
Yeah, and that we refer to the SDGs as, that dominant narrative of sustainable development for now. But in knowing that in 2031, we will still have SIP reports coming into Prime Commons, we can take that reflective look back at whatever the new agenda becomes. Maybe it's how many giraffes you're helping on your campus, and we can look back and search for the number of giraffes. So just to say, don't necessarily feel tied to reporting on the SDGs. We love that framework as it is the dominant framework for right now. But if there are other areas that you can already see and feel for yourself, let that be the guide. Don't feel that you need to be driven by the SDGs. Feel that you need to be driven by the purpose and the values and the mission. And Cheyenne, that comes through quite well when you read through the principles themselves.
Oh, boy, it makes my job so easy. Such intelligent, fast, on the spot, perfect answers. Can we post the CEO study, UNGC study? Can someone post that, please? So one of the other benefits we are mining is there is a lot of good research, pedagogy, conferences from the UNGC. And is it yearly, the CEO study that's done? So they do
It's
UN Global Compact
every other year.
every other year, biannual or biennial. If you look at this report, and again, we are in a very interesting time. And if you read between the lines in the report, what the CEOs are saying is that sustainability is here. It will never go away. Uh, just break it down to SDGs: clean water, renewable energy, reduced inequalities. These are as timeless. These are values, inviolable values and principles that will be supported by companies. So the way it's sort of shifting, which actually I've been making a sort of a joke to say that I think the prime global scholarly community knows something about the business case for sustainability. I was with Tima Bonsall and Lynn Anderson and some other founders of the ONE, Organization and Natural Environment Division of the Academy, in 1999, when it was a novel idea to think about integrating the environment into management education. And now it is just it's part of the foundation. So the CEOs are saying these issues are important, but we can't lead. And this is actually where SDGs it becomes a little tentative. And believe me, I am, and you can see the stripes right behind me. Those are the SDGs integrated. I have part of the reason I'm in this position is I have wildly embraced the SDGs since they came out with the SDG dashboard and working on AI tools. So I am 100% convert. And if the UN continues with a renewal or a refreshing of the SDGs after 2030, then Prime will follow suit because that is part of our guidance in delivering. So the CEOs are making a case that, being sustainable is good business. Good water management is good business. Dealing with your labor force in a decent work and having that contribute to economic growth. So it's still there. And I think it's probably the clearest opportunity for business academia to make a direct contribution because we have a warehouse. So I would like to see in one of the new journals, a systematic review, a literature review of the last 50 years of the business case for sustainability. And I will be taking a personal interest in sort of shepherding the thought leadership on this, because if we can really galvanize the global sort of mindset, the zeitgeist of Prime on this, and have it, Jill, to your point, regionally appropriate, we can be of huge service to business practice moving forward.
David, do you want to respond or maybe summarize your vision, your kind of long-term vision for Prime? And then the other question from Batul is if you think that business school rankings incentivize institutions to integrate RME practices more deeply.
Oh, okay. Well, Shane, keep me on the long-term vision one later. We'll do the so ratings and rankings, of which I have it's a glorious and both agonizing sort of inquiry. First thing, ratings, and Alex pointed this out earlier. Ratings are non-relative. Everybody can get a 5, a 4, a 3, right? Rankings are obviously ordinal, and no matter what population you rank, you're going to get a 1 to 0. So part of the issue is, and why I was so excited to see 42 of our schools in that, and that is actually a ranking, to see us ranked, is that we are on the map. So if we're thinking about how it is that there is a sort of opening for impact to affect mainstream academia in terms of how it's measured, and rankings and ratings, and these are incredibly important, especially to deans and university leadership, right? So we have, I think the revolution, if you will, has started. Times Higher Education put out its impact rating several years ago. The first time the list came out, on that list, it was none of the usual suspects in terms of where you have your NCI, your Stanford, your Wharton, those schools, the kind of elite global schools. It was our schools who are also high quality and contributing, and it was a beautiful thing. Within 2 or 3 years, the list changed, morphed back to more of the kind of usual suspects who appear at the top of global rankings. And I at first I was sort of perturbed by that because I was like, wait a minute, this is the impact space. And then when you realize, if you actually read the data from the bigger school leadership, you saw that they were actually marshaling their massive resources and focusing on impact because they were actually doing it. So I've seen it there. You see on our Prime Advisory Board, Berkeley and Cornell. So we are seeing that the leaders in kind of what you call traditional mainstream academia, and we have them too, Copenhagen Business School. It's not as much of a divisive universe of these schools. There's plenty of overlap, and it is going to get it's going to collapse more. So a project that I'm working on as head of Prime, representing Prime, is I'm the lead author on what will be, if you're familiar with, and maybe somebody could put this in the chat, the first white paper from SAGE, which has an orange cover, which was Andrew Jack and Usha, I'm blanking on her name, from Wichita State. That was a paper that kind of set a standard, a white paper on kind of the state of the art of impact and research. And the second paper is going to look at policy and specifically policy impact. How does research actually get cited and used in policy, which drives a lot of how the world is shaped. And you're going to see in that report, I'm going to use Prime data. And Alex, I haven't told you this yet, but I think we're going to mine, if you can help me mine some of the SIPs for this, please. We're going to show again that our scholarship is being cited and noted out there in the policy that's moving. So policy, SDGs, pedagogical friendliness of schools, a lot of what we are already working on are starting to creep into journal ratings, business school ratings, research ratings. And I think we have very good leverage and influence in that department. So tying that into the longer term strategic vision, the first thing we have to do is to keep Prime in the times that we're in, right? So what do I mean by that? We are doubling down, if you will, to use that language, on the core. And I think, Shine, you explained it perfectly well. The principles of Prime are undying. The way we manifest that and metricize it, that may change a little, but it will always be the same. And to distribute that power and creation more to the community. In pedagogy, we have some exciting things coming up with in the pedagogy department, in the research department, and in student engagement. And Ruben, I saw you were on the call. Ruben's doing some amazing things. So long term, we're going to solidify what we're doing, which is good, and then actually operationalize it in a different flow that is kind of a organic exchange between centralized and decentralized. We also have a target this year where we want to grow Prime to 1,000 schools. And last we counted, the number was 893, Sophie, something like that.
881.
881. And we're going to, again, distribute the recruiting and onboarding duties to all of us, and grow with quality, of course, really tightening our value proposition at all levels and helping schools, because that 1,000 schools will give us more of an imprint moving forward. And I'd say the other big strategic part of the vision is to get, I've been a responsible management, business ethics professor, 59 semesters, as I said. And the responsible management education community has a lot to say and a lot to contribute. So the opening with the UN Global Compact, 23,000 companies and other institutions mixed in there, and an open door to have a fruitful exchange of practice and responsible management, education, and research. That's really the future, because that bridge is more necessary. The companies need this knowledge and management education that we have so they can be resilient, they can be regenerative, they can be creative, and they can be sustainable, both from our SDG sustainability, but also financial sustainability. Paul Pullman, who has been a leader both in Prime and UN Global Compact, he was the previous CEO of Unilever. He was actually on the UN Global Compact board for 12 years. He just had a piece in Time magazine, and he said there's no question, for example, on the green and clean energy front, that the world as a whole is moving on from coal, gas, and fossil fuels because it isn't efficient economically, it is not sustainable environmentally, and we want to support these movements. And another interesting thing from student perspective, Christina's been doing a tremendous job with all of our various initiatives with student engagement and student competitions and accelerators. We're finding that the companies are sometimes they're not as vocal about it, or maybe they don't actually recruit specifically for graduates that have been kind of exposed to responsible management education and SDGs. But I'm learning quickly that there's a real unmet need between companies who need our students and our students who need jobs. And just like with faculty and research is kind of the lingua franca of an academic career, getting a job is something that students really want. So we want to put Prime in the kind of practical interstices of business, society, and our students and our faculty. More on this vision will be sort of tuned up, because we want it to have it be in concert with One Global Compact. And also we're relying on our Prime Advisory Board, which I am personally taking on as one of my projects to really develop that and work very intimately with them. So we should have a whole grand, it'll be basically 3 or 4 strategic objectives to roll out at the global forum. So I didn't put my email in there, but it's david.steingard@unglobalcompact.org. So please, I would like to stay engaged. I will be setting up a little chat with the head sessions where you can schedule in once I get settled. So it's day 17. So at the rate I'm going, it'll probably be day 20. No, I don't know. But thank you all for your support and ideas. And I do think the time is now. It's very clear that Prime is needed. Prime has the resources. Prime has the motivation. And we will continue to contribute.
Great. I think that was an excellent way to close. So thank you all again. We'll be sending out these slides, the recording, to everyone that has registered, and really appreciate all of your engagement on this webinar today. And yeah, have a great rest of your
And
week.
one more round of applause for the team putting this together. Where's my applause? There it is. Just wonderful.
Thank you, everyone.